Yeah.
Hey, hello everyone. Good afternoon. I think we're all, for those of us who have been here, it's been a long day, and not just, the company has been wonderful and the conversations have been amazing, but we are in a very peculiar, difficult moment right now, and I just want to acknowledge that. I want to acknowledge that I don't know, our colleague, our co-PI, Radhika and I, co-PI, Nora, we all have somebody, but she learned some devastating news this morning, and so she's not here, understandably, and we have just learned, I haven't been looking at the news because I've been here all day, but we've just learned that the ground invasion has just started, and it should be kind of in full swing in a few hours. So with all of that acknowledged and understood, we are here to gather us as Rutgers faculty and Rutgers alum, and to really keep this conversation going amongst us. It's a means to connect, it's a means to build, it's a means for those of us who don't know each other to hear each other and understand the histories of our different departments and fields. And so with that, I hope it's okay. I know I brought you all here. If we shorten the panel a bit, Maya has an obligation, she wants to be home in a safe place in a little bit. And so I hope that's okay. Edward, Donna, Maurice, we're going to do about an hour, so for everyone as well. So let me read introductions, not to be like, I'm somber, but I'm very grateful for you all to be here. So I'm just going to read everyone's introductions, starting right here to the left of my colleague Radhika. Dr. Donna Austin is an anthropologist, writer, and public intellectual whose research interests include race, gender, religion, policing, protest, digital ethnography, and Islam in America. Her dissertation is her brilliant dissertation is an analysis of Black U.S. Islam and spiritual protest in the post-Ferguson era. Donna has published journal articles and book chapters on the historical contributions of African American Muslims in the arts, culture, and social justice movements, the intersections of Islamophobia and anti-Blackness, gendered Islamophobia, Black Islam in U.S. politics, race, religion, and gender in digital spaces. Dr. Austin currently serves as foundation anthropologist for disciplinary conversations and public events at the Winter Grant Foundation, and she's an adjunct professor at Rutgers, and also, and this is why I felt very strongly that Donna's voice was so important here, she was both an undergrad at Rutgers during a time in which there were student struggles. Shut that, or tell them to come in. Get your asses in here. That's the kind of day it's been. Like, we just throw all the cussing kind of stuff out the window. We good, right? We're working. That's my kid too. Donna was both an undergrad and a graduate student here at Rutgers. Has long been involved with student activism here on campus. So I thought she was just a vital voice to have in this conversation. Moving down the line here, Maurice Wallace is an associate professor of English at Rutgers. His fields of expertise include African American literature and cultural studies, 19th century American literature, and the history and representation of American slavery and gender studies. He's the author of Constructing the Black Masculine, Identity and Ideality in African American Men's Literature and Culture, 1775 to 1995, a book on the history of Black manhood in African American letters and culture, and is co-editor with Sean Michelle Smith of a volume of scholarly articles on early photography and African American identity entitled Pictures and Progress, Early Photography and the Making of African American Identity. Professor Wallace also teaches in areas of visual culture and sound studies. Next on his left, Dr. Edward Ramsamy is currently Associate Professor and Chair of the Africana Studies Department and a member of the graduate faculties of Geography and Urban Planning and Policy Development at the Bloustein School. He has served as chair since 2014. That's a long time. No? Yeah, that's a long it's a long time to be chair. And served as the vice chair of the department from 2008 to 2014. In addition to his service within the Africana Studies Department, he has also been involved in several programs and initiatives to promote cross-cultural understanding, diversity, and inclusion at Rutgers and beyond. And of course, last but not ever least, Maya Migdashi is Associate Professor of Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies and a lecturer, and now the Director of the Program for Middle East Studies at Rutgers University. She received her PhD in anthropology from Columbia University and also holds an MA from Georgetown and a BA from the Lebanese American University in Beirut. So thank you so much at the end of the day here. And when we were conceiving of, and my dear co-PI here, Radhika, who's helped me, Radhika Balakrishnan, who agreed to come and just sit with me. And also because Radhika is one of the founding members of a group that we want to speak a little bit about today, the BIPOC Faculty Caucus, that has been trying to mobilize and have conversations precisely like in the last panel about like who our people are, trying to find those people here on that campus. We've been trying to do this for what, the last 5 years now? We started 5 years? Yeah. So Radhika's been there from the beginning. I think I was on leave when you started, but I would have been. So Radhika's here to give us some of that insight and to bring that to the conversation as well. When we conceived of this conference, I thought it would not be useful. I mean, of course, we love having Dylan and Gary and Carmen and everybody here, but we also wanted to make sure we as Rutgers faculty had this conversation, Rutgers students, grad students, and continued the conversation after our esteemed guests had gone. And so that's what I hope we can start to do here, talking about the specifics of where we are and what we are doing around issues of race and this very fraught term, liberation, at this moment. So I wanted to start out, first of all, just by asking all of you, and including Radhika as well, speaking about your particular programs and disciplinary formations and your own relationships to them. Maybe if we could just go down and kind of talk, I mean, we just talked about, Edward, how you've been chair of Africana for a long time, but maybe we can each talk about how we came to those particular departments and programs and how we have kind of been in that space. You know, embody that space since our arrival. How are we in this space of teaching race and being people who want to create spaces of liberational practice in our classrooms and with our colleagues? How has that been for you here at Rutgers? Do you want to start, Donna?
I'll go at the end.
Yeah.
So I've, my position as faculty here has been always sort of as a precarious, either grad student faculty or, now as an adjunct. And so I've hopped around in a few different departments. I was a TA in anthropology because I'm trying to pay the bills, right? And then I taught in the writing program for a number of years. I taught at EOF Summer Institute, which is also, by the way, my favorite ever teaching assignment. I've also, and currently in American Studies, though not teaching this semester. And I think, so I don't know, so my arrival in those spaces has always been sort of like, okay, how can I get the bills paid for the next 6 months to a year or something like that, which, has its own sort of, it has its own sort of insights, right? But I think, sort of, what was the second part of the question? Sort of
how you came to it and what it feels like to do race and try to create these spaces of liberation here at Rutgers.
What does it feel like? I think definitely always swimming upstream, I think in most cases. Satisfying sometimes, when you're able to sort of cut through, all of the administrative, neoliberal corporate crap and actually connect with students and get them to understand something or understand how to think about something, or you realize that the tools that you're trying to give them, they've actually picked up and started to try and use. On the flip side of that, of course, there's a lot of frustration because there's, the money ain't right. The support from the institution is not right. The hostility, even open hostility at times, not just in this particular climate. Some of that hostility is also from students. You know, like when you have students who have a particular worldview and you're giving them information that runs counter to that, particularly if you're a Black woman faculty member who's Muslim and got this, you know, whatever, got this whole situation going on, sometimes that can be fraught. But for me, in spite of that, what I'm looking for is I'm actually trying to give students things that they can use to understand the world around them, and not like I don't give a shit about the rest of the stuff. You know, and to the extent that I can do that, to the extent that I can get them to leave my classroom and understand how, you know, how to make sense of what all of the different types of isms that they're sort of like, you know, that we're all dealing with, right? And how to make sense of that and how to make a space for themselves to do work to carry on the various types of struggles that need to go forward. That's sort of what I hope to do.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for inviting me and letting me be a part of this conversation. I thought the last panel was tremendous. This is my first time in this space, but it will not be my last time. Clearly, I was so profoundly moved by the last panel, and it had as much to do with the genius on the panel and the beautiful trees outside the window who I just imagine get to listen to. So the whole, someone's mention of the sort of their sense of themselves as being connected ecologically to their surroundings, to the environment, resonated with me. And there's something about this space and the honesty and the candor and
Cussing.
yes, and the cussing, the realness, the non-performative, genuine thinking out loud, thinking with, being with, identification with, all of that is divine. All of that felt sacred to me. And so when I say I was moved, it wasn't that I was entertained. It was that I felt something visceral. And in some ways, that begins to answer the question put to us, at least in my experience. I'm trained as a literary critic. I'm trained as a literary critic, but I'm here at Rutgers in particular because I feel at once sent and called, right? Like Brittany in the previous panel, I'm a product of a working class, small African-American Baptist church outside of Baltimore. And I have for a long, long time had, this relationship with that formation that has been sometimes beautiful and sometimes something else, right? Sometimes tense. And so I say that because at least if there's one thing that I owe that community that produced me is a certain kind of sensitivity to what is not rational and in front of me. So I've learned that my heart, my soul, my spirit has its intelligence too. And I sort of operate out of that when it seems and feels appropriate. All of that is to say that I am at Rutgers, I think, 4. I've known Cheryl Wall my whole career, but I had never met her until my job talk. And it was as if we'd known each other forever. And then a year later, she was gone from us. And so I feel a certain commitment to what she began. And she was very gracious to say at the interview when I asked her, what would you like? I know you're going to retire soon, but what would you like to see? And she said, it doesn't matter what I want to see what you do. And that was a real gift, because we're not, to the degree that I have company in this, and I do have company in this in my department. I'll make this brief because I could go on. I've got beautiful colleagues in my field, in my department. And I've been at this for 27, 28 years now, and have never had this kind of experience, never experienced something like collegial love like I do for my colleagues for some of my colleagues in the English department, some of my colleagues in the English department. Those are my people. The ones who are my people, the ones I love, they know who they are, because I tell them. And I'm grateful. So I'm here for that project. I'm here for graduate students, especially those in the field. I'm here to kind of look around the classroom in the introduction to literary principles that I teach for the students, sometimes one, sometimes two, sometimes three or four, who need me in some way. And I want to connect with them, even if it's to affirm their place in this setting, right? Even if it's not anything particularly deep, it's not field forming, but it is about their right to exist. We've heard that phrase more than once this afternoon. And I'm here for them, but I'm also finally here for me. Like, this work fulfills me. This work, struggle though it is, as frustrating as it is, as unrewarding as it is, as unappreciated, underappreciated as it is, as so many people have said far better than I have, like, there's something about it that still gratifies me. And so I'm here this afternoon because I wanted to meet and be in the company of all of you who I think are also my people.
Thank you. That was an inspiring story. I actually, grew up outside of the United States. I'm third generation South African, and someone who looks like me ended up in South Africa because of the British Empire. So many things can be explained through empire. They needed laborers on the sugarcane plantations of South Africa, and that's how both my grandparents ended up in South Africa. So, I grew up, was born in the mid-60s, and grew up in the heart of, as apartheid was evolving into this very formalized, structured system of race. And so your entire life in South Africa was circumscribed by your racial identity. To make great multiculturalism, although you can't cross the cultures, right? If you were Indian, you went to the school. If you were Indian, you didn't give us Indian languages to learn at our schools, etc. And that's the reason to keep you apart from everyone else. And that's the system you were born into, and you get socialized into it, and you get, somewhat accustomed to it. But you very soon become aware of the glaring inequalities of that system. So, for example, in my high school, right opposite our high school was a very nice cricket ground. Beautiful, manicured and the pitches. But it was for whites only. So we went to high school, but you couldn't go across the street to play in that cricket ground, and various things. So I became aware of this, and I think the one important thing for me from the South African experience was to try and struggle against those fixed boundaries that the system imposed upon you. And, when I was in my early teens, the major political figure in South Africa at that time was Stephen Biko. I'm not sure how many of you have heard of him. Mandela gets all the credit, and Mandela is important. I'm not trying to negate Mandela in any way. But if you didn't have the activism of Stephen Biko in the 1970s, you probably wouldn't have had Mandela released in 1990. And Stephen Biko was deeply influenced by Frantz Fanon and Malcolm X. The idea of liberation of the mind, not seeing yourself in a subservient position. But one of the things he also stressed, and this is not much appreciated about Biko's activism, he said that people of Indian ancestry, African ancestry, and then in South Africa you have this crazy category called colored, that if you were of mixed race ancestry, you were classified as a colored person, that they should think of themselves as collectively oppressed and fight together. So when I went to university in the 1980s, unfortunately Biko was killed by then, 77, the government killed him in prison. But that was a sort of political and intellectual interest that I cultivated. And I majored in geography and economics. Economics was still the usual, cost-benefit analysis and supply-demand stuff that we haven't moved on. But I was fortunate to major in geography. And in the 1980s was a big ferment in geography at that time, right? With the radical geography tradition, David Harvey, Neil Smith, some of them were here at Rutgers.
At Rutgers,
All that ferment, which I enjoyed very much. And a Rutgers professor actually came to give a talk at the university I was going to in South Africa, an Indian university, by the way. And her title of her talk was "The Limits of Marxist Theory for Planning, Policy and Practice." I said, who's this white conservative coming to talk about this subject? The limits of Marxist theory. Marxist theory is everything to sort of this uninformed, overzealous undergraduate at the time. Her name was Susan Feinstein. She was here for a number of years at the Blaustein School. And in my naive way, I started, arguing with her and telling her how conservative she was, and, too much influence on Max Weber in her analysis, et cetera, et cetera. And, I was ready to leave the room after that, having, satisfied myself. And she actually came to me afterwards and said, I really liked your questions. I feel that you engaged in my work. Have you ever thought of doing a PhD? I said, I thought of it, but, didn't entertain the possibility. I was actually in this track to become a teacher. That was one avenue for Indians that was a good profession. High school or primary school teacher. Well, to kind of long story short, I was in communication with her and she arranged for me to come and do a PhD at the Blaustein School under her here.
Wow.
She had a research assistantship and we still disagree with each other, but she's been wonderful to me. So that's how I ended up, at Rutgers. And at Rutgers, two names resonated with, besides some of the people in planning and geography. Obviously, Neil Smith was here at the time, a big name in geography. But a person that many don't hear about, sadly, is Ivan van Sertima.
Oh, yes. Oh, came before Columbus.
Yeah.
And Ivan van Sertima was a hero to us in South Africa.
Yes. He lived in Highland Park.
Because,
I took 3 classes with him.
yeah. And one of the things that he did was talk about black agency in history. He did this little nice book on black writers in the Caribbean, and then they came before Columbus and other stuff. So when I came to Rutgers, I tried to find him and found him in the basement of Beck Hall. And then the figure of Paul Robeson. Paul Robeson was a hero to us in South Africa in so many ways. And that's how I gravitated towards Africana studies. And then, like Donna mentioned, we as graduate students have to find money. So I was able to get a job as a residence counselor in Metro Hall. So what this meant is taking care of a whole lot of undergraduates, making sure they don't drink themselves to death. And this was just shortly afterwards one of those students died at Rutgers from alcohol. But the hall that I was in charge of housed on the third floor the Paul Robeson Special Interest section where I met Donna. And that's how I became more in tune with the Africana Studies Department. And then they needed someone to teach courses on Africa because Walton Johnson was away. And then when he came back, he became Dean of Livingston. And so that's how I ended up teaching part-time, and I was fortunate to get a job. Just, one last comment on the state of Rutgers. Black studies was a very important space to render visible the invisible Black experience. It's very important. But, Black studies went through this period of neglect and, there's been, some promotion now. I hope that will continue, but I don't know. And that's in part the reason I ended up being chair for so long, because we have a lot of junior faculty. And we have a lot of senior faculty like Walton Johnson, who's, in his 80s, still very energetic, far more energetic than me. But, that's the bifurcation we have. Now, we have some good young scholars coming up in Africana studies, and the last dean, gave us some good hires. Whether that will continue under this, fiscal management system now, I don't know. Yes. But it's a little bit of myself.
Thank you. Thanks, Edward.
Thank you, everyone. This is so wonderful. I know a lot of you, but that's really good to meet you. I am very grateful for Africana Studies for hiring Murarekat also.
Yes.
Who should be here with us today and is with us. So when I always say that the most political thing that I do at Rutgers is teach the introduction to the modern Middle East. And when I was hired at Rutgers, I had a conversation with some people here, and it was partly like, there is no Department of Middle East Studies at Rutgers. And my contract, in concert with others, gave me a 50% teaching commitment in the program for Middle East Studies. Although the tenure line is here because there is no department. And I have the right to change that because it is not a department. I can change it at any point. But I think it is, but I don't, because I think that it's a really critical, what we do in the classroom is really very important, particularly at times like this, which themselves are created as exceptions within structural forms of colonization. And one of the reasons why I think it's important for me to teach this class is because I was tenure track and now I am tenured. Thanks, Rutgers. And I know, and I've heard from students and I've heard from adjuncts that sometimes when they teach this class, they skip Israel-Palestine.
Too hard.
And they skip it because they are afraid to teach it. And they're afraid to teach it because of a decades-long security apparatus that monitors how people teach the historical record and the contemporary reality. So I really also urge, like those of us that are tenured or are tenure screened, we need to be in these classes. We need to make sure that our students are also not being, and to me, like to teach a class on the modern Middle East and not teach Israel-Palestine is intellectually bankrupt. I'm doing something wrong, like this cannot happen. It's impossible. I'm not doing my job. And this, it gets very complicated with a lot of sort of, it gets complicated, but I really love teaching at Rutgers. I know that sounds really cheesy, but I really love teaching here. I love teaching my graduate students. I love teaching the undergrad students. And one of the reasons why I really like and remain at Rutgers is because they inspire me. They are so like, they're on, man. They're like, you know. And the second thing is like being in this room, and this is where it becomes very important, I think, for people who have all, you know, and I've been on these watch lists since I was a graduate student. It's so important to be in a department where I can look at my colleagues, I know they have my back, I have their back. We don't have to agree on everything, but we share a kind of principle, and I know that, and I can reach out to them, and they can reach out to me. And I think that's what makes Rutgers particularly special for me. The students and my immediate colleagues. The immediate ones. So, but there are also structural issues that go on to this that I think are important to mention. I recently also, when I was appointed to and the reason why I became director is because nobody else wanted to do it.
Yeah.
Really. And I was like, please, I'll do it next time. I don't want to do it now. And they were like, if you don't do it, it's over.
It's done.
It's done. And that's why I did it. So then when I was doing the sort of negotiations, whatever, you know, they give you a stipend, and then they give you a course release, and they say, and if you want to teach instead of taking that course release, we will give you X amount of money to teach that class, which you were given as a course release. Mm-hmm. And that amount of money that they give you is almost double what they would pay an adjunct to teach.
Whoa. I didn't know that.
And that's part of this
That's
conversation here too.
Yeah.
Because we can only be who we are, we can only do our jobs, and we can only be in the classroom and be there in an intellectually honest way if we have the conditions to do that work, and if we recognize ourselves as the same, as having the same, and really sort of a strong political, I mean, okay, maybe it's not like double, but it's
More.
a lot more than what the union asked for and didn't get. Maybe it's like 75%. It's a lot more. And you know, what I realized was nobody talks about this. Nobody actually talks about these things. And these are the conditions of work on campus. It is what makes, allows us to say certain things or show up in certain ways. And it is why one of the things that, Sylvia has been really good at helping me understand how the institution works. We need a department. We need a department of Middle East studies. We need jobs. That's also a job-making logic. But we also need it because our students need it. New Jersey is one of the largest, right, Muslim populations.
Per capita, yeah,
Per capita.
in relation to overall population.
In the United States.
We're tiny, but yeah.
It's also the second largest Arab population in the United States. And it is bankrupt that we don't have a department. We don't have a place where students can come and learn and know that the people teaching them are not afraid to teach them. So that's my call here. Help us get a department.
Actually, I want to piggyback off that, and I actually want to, and then I want to ask Veronica to talk about the BIPOC faculty caucus. I want to point out, thank you so much for being here, but I also want to point out that there's some conspicuous absences on this panel in this conversation about how we do race at this university. There's no one from Latino Caribbean Studies here. We have one Indigenous faculty here at Rutgers. One. Well, Maya is. But one person who is solely, they teach, Jimmy Sweet. in American Studies teaches Indigenous literature, and you absolutely do too. I did, sorry.
Evelyn teaches.
Evelyn teaches. Evelyn is currently a postdoc.
Right.
Okay, so I'm talking about, tenure track faculty, right? And that's a travesty. I mean, he was just hired 2 years ago, 3 years ago, okay? And also, and I just want to point this out, and this is why I think we need to have this conversation today for a little bit and then keep it going, because our departments and all the work we do, we are all so siloed, right? Like, Africana's in Livingston, you're on College Ave, American Studies over here, Latino Caribbean Studies over here. Some of us are in humanities, some of us are in social sciences. Sometimes we've never even met in the same room. I've been here 11 years. Me and Edward have never had a conversation. Do you see what I mean? Like, this is the reality here. And so I wanted to just point that out and to say, yes, we should all be supporting you to get that department.
Yes.
We should ask ourselves why we do not have a department of race and ethnic studies when every single kind of component that's there, that's needed to have that is here. Why don't we have that? I don't know. So these are the questions I have. And so, I'm going to give to Radhika now. To that, after the murder of George Floyd, it was 2020, right? When we started the BIPOC, or did it start before that? It was before that. Okay, so tell me about that. That was when we mobilized, kind of like put it into overdrive. We started having these conversations, and we started a group called the BIPOC Faculty Caucus, which Radhika was there from the inception. So I actually wanted to ask you, Radhika, from the beginning, what was some of the impetus for that? And what did you think? Because part of it is like, how do we build that connection between all of us? What was the impetus for it? And what, we all get busy, COVID happened. What did you start out wanting it to be? And what happened? And how can we, and then for all of us to jump in and to say, how can we start to, again, build those coalitions that we need to get the things we want?
Thanks, and Sylvia just asked me like yesterday.
I did. I said, come support me.
Right, of course I will. So when I was thinking about this, I was like, wow, so many of the people that we first started this conversation with have left Rutgers. And I think that's important to remember. So Nelson Maldonado Torres and I worked together actually under the Barchi administration to try and get them to understand anything about race. I mean, so we met with them, we kind of gave up after a while, and then when we got Holloway, we thought, oh, okay, here's this moment we can kind of engage. I'm about to follow the rest of my colleagues by starting to curse, but I'll wait. And so it was Carter Mathis, Evie Shockley, myself, and Nelson. And so we started talking, and then we said, okay, we met, and we wrote this long thing to the administration to tell them the kind of history of things that had happened at Rutgers in terms of increasing diversity amongst the faculty. The legacy of Cheryl Wall, what she had done in terms of working with the former president, not Barchi, the one before, about how McCormick, and they had a committee. And so we were kind of like, okay, you guys are new, let's give you some history lessons. And these are the things that worked, and so we had, we were working in hoping that we were having a conversation. And the first meeting, President Holloway said, hey, I get you guys, I used to be you, I'm on your side, blah, blah, blah.
She said that to our faces.
And then yes, I want, please, we're all in this together, let me figure it out. And then we had another meeting, and we said, okay, we would like to meet with you once a semester. And he's like, I can't do that. I mean, I got other things to do. Meet you twice a semester. I mean,
Oh my God.
and so then, anyway, but we decided that it was important, and it was all this stupid DEI crap about how to increase diversity. And we were saying, look, you've got a lot of diversity. You also actually have a lot of expertise in these fields. Why don't you talk to us and not bring in some corporate model of DEI? So we were also willing to do this for free. I mean, it wasn't like and so we had a mission statement, which I have here, where we were going to, I won't read the whole thing, but we watched the DEI inclusion without the consultation with the faculty with expertise, and we want workload compensation for BIPOC faculty who are doing this work, and we were asking for like a graduate assistant. I mean, it's not even like we were asking for at least some acknowledgement that this was work for the university that would do the university better. We wanted campus safety, support resources. Anyway, diversity strategic, critique of the diversity strategic plan. And I think one of the things that we were all really focused on was how do we build a community amongst ourselves. And as many of this place is so diffuse. You know only the people you know. And so many people are like, oh, you're Rutgers, you know so-and-so, and it's like, well, no. So we know the few people that we know, and so we said, well, how do we build a sense of community amongst the BIPOC faculty, and not just, but BIPOC faculty who work on issues of race. So it wasn't just sort of a check mark so that the DEI can say we now have, another Indian in engineering, but to really talk about this as a community and as an organizing factor. And we got, and I remember, what's his name, the chancellor? Not the
McCormick?
No.
Archie?
No, the current one.
Conway.
Oh, no, yeah. Prabhas.
Bogi.
And so when he noticed that our BIPOC caucus was mostly SAS faculty, right? Because we were trying to reach out beyond New Brunswick, but this was all on our free time. And he says, oh, you're all in a small sandbox. So it didn't count. It didn't count enough, right? So why do we need to do this? So anyway, and then after Evie, it was Erica Edwards. And so it's really telling that Nelson is no longer here. Erica is no longer here. I will be gone in June, right? So yeah, I'm leaving. It's good. Deb Vargas is gone. I mean, if you think of the number of faculty of color that we have lost, right? And they're like, we want diversity, we want to keep these folks, and nothing to actually keep the people who are doing this work here and give some kind of support. And that's what we were trying to do. And because everyone left, the BIPOC faculty caucus hasn't met in a year or so. And I think when we were thinking about this is to use this process to hopefully jumpstart and have new leadership to take it over. Because I think it is an important group of people and a conversation to have. And also each of us, I think Dylan said this, it's like we have the administration and then we have us, right? And so we can't take on the administration individually, but if we have a collective group of people making a voice, the fact that we wrote that letter to Holloway about not mentioning Muslim students and 200 people signed it, he did write a letter, right? He did that. And if we hadn't done that, Muslim students would never have heard from the president that they even existed in this unit.
Palestinian students.
And Palestinian
students. Say the word Palestinian.
He even used that. So I think it's really important for us to think about how to organize that caucus again, why that collective voice is really important. And one last thing I want to say, and this is a personal one, not about the BIPOC caucus, is, I actually got my PhD in economics. Yeah, that cost-benefit analysis stuff. But there used to be a lot of Marxists here then. And we took over buildings because of apartheid in South Africa. And I remember teaching my classes outside the student center because I wouldn't go in the buildings. And so the kind of organizing that's happened at Rutgers has a long history. And we can't forget that history, and we stopped having classes when the clerical workers strike, and we wouldn't cross the picket line. And so there's a history of that kind of organizing that we need to remember that history, and I think, as they just shut down internet in Gaza and are about a ground invasion, we need to keep that kind of organizing alive. And if there's ever a time to do that, it is now.
Oh, go ahead, Donna.
As everyone's talking, I'm thinking about a lot of that history, and specifically, one of the things that came to mind was the Conklin Hall takeover at Rutgers, Newark.
Yep.
And one of there's two things that I'm thinking of, right? Because I came in as a student, sometime after that, right? But I think as a beneficiary of the type of community that those types of organizers created, right? So one of the things that I remember a few years ago, Vicki Donaldson, who's one of the participants in that Conklin Hall takeover, who is very much alive and still testifying and giving testimony about her experience as a student organizer, one of the things that she said, I remember, that was particularly impactful was one of the elements of their success, in her estimation, was the fact that the community in Newark was in full support of what they were doing, bringing them food, like offering, different types. Like, so they had relationships beyond departments, beyond faculty, beyond, right, whatever, right? And I think when I came to Rutgers in 1990 as a first-year student, the community, one of the things that was very impactful for me was that there was Black folks all over this university. I don't care if they was a janitor or a housekeeper or someone, Dean Wally-Torian, who's retired now, who I wasn't an EOF student because I was out of state, so I wasn't eligible for EOF, even though I was like economically sort of EOF first gen, all of that. But Wally-Torian and people like him, like Wally was my counselor, even though he didn't have official responsibility for me. And there were people like that in the Africana Studies department. Dr. Gerald Davis, right, who was the chair of Africana at that time, whose office was open. If I dropped it, and this was before I figured out that, okay, what can I do with an Africana Studies major or whatever, but like, Dr. Davis was a place where I could go and then, so to help me sort of figure out my own life, but also as a student activist, there was a community of student activists here that I could plug myself into, who were also connected to the people, because we also, of course, we got that message, right? You came to New Brunswick, well, don't walk down George Street. And I'm like, well, I live down George Street. I come from a community like George Street, so, fuck y'all, right? But we had connections to people in the community. We did mentoring in Paul Robeson School in New Brunswick. We did mentoring in other, so I feel like I and my peers at that time, we benefited a lot from the fact that it wasn't perfect, and there certainly was more work that we could have done. But I feel like there was a community of mutual support for liberatory goals that I could plug myself into. And that is still actually fairly vibrant. I mean, when Trayvon Martin was murdered, and then George Zimmerman was acquitted, I remember that day I was thinking, I need to be on the street somewhere. There was a protest in Newark, and I went and I just showed up, and unsurprisingly, I saw, a number of my peers who I hadn't talked to since I left Rutgers as an undergrad. Hadn't seen them, hadn't talked, but we were all still showing up in the same types of spaces. And it was I was happy to see them. It was, somewhat of a surprise because I hadn't seen you in 20 years, right? But also not really, because this is because we're all still doing that work. Together, apart, whatever. And so I feel like these types of issues of faculty being really picked off systematically because, I think it was the case, and I don't know, maybe it still is the case, but I'm pretty sure that we have less Black faculty than we've had, right, in like the 70s, I think, right, those numbers, right? And so, it's less. And, right, so, but part of what's different is not only what's happening inside the university walls, but also the fact that, New Brunswick has been systematically emptied of much of its Black population in the last, 30 years that I've been living in New Jersey. Other types of things, and those things are not, you have to sort of, I think to get the things that we want, we have to sort of go back to that, or because those sort of connected communities and struggle is actually how these departments came to be in the first place.
Right.
How students got admitted in greater numbers in the first place. How, all of the things that we have now, which really ain't a lot at all, even came to be. And that was because the community outside was invested in what happened here, and we were invested in them, those of us who happened to sort of break through the barrier or be the first in our family to do that sort of thing. But it feels a lot more fragmented now, right? For all sorts of reasons. And I feel that's one of the things that will be really helpful to us, not just sort of this lateral across, colleagues, right? But also organizing across communities that have a vested interest in what goes on inside the walls of these universities, even if they're not students or faculty here.
I want to honor what I said at the beginning about being mindful of what's going on outside this room. But I wanted to, this is the last question, but I want all of us to answer it. I actually want to open it up to the room and for students and for those of you, our colleagues here. I guess the question is, and the basic question is, for all of you, having done the work, some of you, been here, since undergrad, some of us more recent, what do you need? What do you need to do the work for your departments, for your programs? What do you need? We're sitting here talking about race and liberation in the moment that we're in. What do we need? This country doesn't love you, this institution doesn't fucking love you. So we don't want love, we don't want approval, we don't want any of that. We don't even need recognition, like who cares? But other than that, what do you need? And I guess that's the question I want to kind of close with, because I want, everyone to kind of voice that from where you are, the Africana Studies as an adjunct, in the English department, Middle East Studies, the BIPOC Faculty Caucus as grad students. What do you need here? Maybe if we just start vocalizing that and we hear each other's needs, maybe we can start building on them. So maybe I would like to, I would actually really love for myself, because we imagine this seminar as a place to start saying that out loud and figuring out how we can hear each other and support each other with what we need. So do you want to start?
I just got them problems.
We could come down that end, or whatever, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
I think I can respond to this. I need cross-departmental, cross-disciplinary community. I need to know where my people are, and I can't let go of that question, that conversation from the previous panel. I need to know where my people are, and I need to know that my people can find me and I can find them when we need each other most. I also need to be part of an institution that is committed to the idea of what a university should be. I think that among other public failures in this country right now, that leadership in higher education is abysmal. At least abysmal. And I think it's because not very many are committed to the idea of the university as a space for the development and exchange of thought that serves a public good. I won't go any further than that except to say that any more moneyed interests run universities. And I think that this forum today is important. I don't want us to undervalue what it means for us to get together and have this conversation, because it may not directly reach any of the offices of the institution's elite, but right now we're changing the weather. We are altering the mood and the atmosphere, because what I take away from this conversation, what you take away from this conversation, what everyone takes away from this conversation will inevitably follow us into our conversations, into our departments, and we will, now that we have met and know each other a bit, we will be able to have conversations in our departments about persons outside of our departments, right? Who have certain experiences, expertise. Like, wouldn't it be remarkable if I could call on Sylvia, as I have,
You can.
to come to the English department.
Oh, yes, I have.
Right, yes, yes, to come to the English department and engage us about some matters that some folks in the English department are thinking about, but in Sylvia's absence, even though she's right here. Like, why wouldn't we? And yet we do this every day. It's like, it's as if we imagine our departments are autonomous intellectual units who don't need any other department, intellectually or organizationally. So I'm sort of passionate about that, and I desperately, even selfishly, want and need, because I was trained at Duke in the 1990s, and it was a space where everything was in question, right? Even the study of literature, all the canons were falling, and it was easy to move in between discrete units of the university. And so even though I'm appointed in an English department, I'm formed interdisciplinarily, and so I need the interdiscipline. I need Black studies. I need critical Black studies. I need the history of Black studies. I need Black studies thinkers at all levels. Faculty, graduate students, undergraduates, staff if they want to. That's what
you need.
I need.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean, those are, vital issues. If I could just go back to the comment that Donna made with respect to the Cochrane Hall takeover. I think there were three important demands that the students made in that takeover. One was more Black faculty, secondly was more Black students, and thirdly was curriculum reform. And on all three, we fallen back. Things were better off in the 1970s. So you talk about progress. And so, I'm very interested in, my limited way I've tried with some students is to make sure that, again, we need to move on this model that you said at the university is sort of this technical school that breeds, cromputer programmers. And that's it. And that's the approach that we are taking, with this labor, with this credit-intensive majors, for example. There's no incentive for a student in biology to take a course outside biology because they have to meet so many requirements as to finish their biology degree. And I work with a group of students in Peter Montrestein we're about the only Big Ten school that doesn't have a vibrant requirement that requires students to engage with race and ethnicity in the United States. You know, they have this core curriculum that's amorphous. You know, you can do, you know, sort of Renaissance Italy and meet a diversity requirement. And I think that's very important that, you know, in this day and age, given all that's going on, that we don't have that requirement. And then, in addition, what you said is very important, but there has to be some structure to incentivize this. You know, at the moment you can't teach courses, co-teach courses across departments. What are you counting to that, you know, that 4 courses you have to teach? So if you do something, you do it outside and, you know, negotiate more money if you can, etc.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
But there needs to be some incentive, you know, to do those sorts of things. So there's, and, you know, just stop producing this, as you said, these fancy diversity reports in glowing color that are, you know, how many thousands of dollars they pay.
Hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Hires.
Yeah.
We need curriculum changes.
Can I say though that
Yeah.
I sort of feel like we are already incentivized. We need the structures
Yes.
that will accommodate.
No, we are incentivized.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
They are
yes.
not.
But
They are not.
Yeah.
They are not.
They are not.
So, you know, do you get an assistant professor to teach one more course because you want to teach it across department? No, you have. So those, that should be recognized as part of your teaching. If you teach a course with another individual, you know, seminar or something. But there's lots of stuff, you know, that can be done. And I too was very optimistic when, or hopeful when Holloway came along. I mean, after he was the student of Ralph Bunche, right? But you know, maybe the you know, the model when you think of which American president made the most progress when it comes to race in America, it was Lyndon Johnson, right?
Right.
So yeah, that's awesome.
If I'd been asked this question a month ago, I would have said something else. What I need mostly right now is for everybody's hands to be on deck to stop a genocide. That's what I need. I need it not to be the responsibility of Palestinian scholars, Arab scholars, Muslim scholars.
That's right.
I need English, anthropology, mathematics, medical, you know, every place you can think of, medical school. That's what we need.
Yeah.
And we need everybody to commit publicly to protecting our students.
Yeah.
And to do that work about protecting our students, and I need people to not be afraid, because fear is not worth it. It's not worth it. That's what I need, like in this moment. If you had asked me a month ago, I would have said something different.
Yeah.
I need it not to be always the same 3 people, or the same 4 people. I need to be able to say, I'm tired,
Yeah.
and so is Noura, and so is Sil, and so are we. We are tired, and we need to feel like we can take a break and know that everything will continue. So what I need right now is for everybody to do something that shouldn't be very brave. To say, ceasefire, turn the water back on, turn the electricity, allow medicine to go in,
Open the border.
open, well, don't,
I mean,
yeah,
Let people out.
let it come.
stop ethnic cleansing, or the plan to ethnically cleanse Gaza. That's what I need. That's what I need from everybody at Rutgers. That is what our students need.
Yeah.
And that's what our colleagues need.
Right, and I just want to build on what you're saying. I mean, and that is, you know, explicit in a way, but it also, you can express, we can fulfill your need in so many ways. We can fulfill that need for each other in so many ways. That need can be fulfilled on, like, let me teach your class this week. Or, you know, it can be fulfilled in, you know, just, hey, you know, like, I'll come to your thing, let's go do, you know what I mean? Like, it can be fulfilled in so many ways.
Let me teach
teach it.
Yeah,
Doesn't
let
have
us
to
do a
be in
teach
a
it without
Middle East
fear of
Studies
being
department.
punishment or recommendation. So, I wanted to, so like I said, thank you. I want to open it up. I saw that Mish has her hand up, has their hand up, and then want to take any final comments, and kind of, yeah. So go ahead, Mish. Do you want a mic? Are you good?
Sure, we can hear you. Use the mic. Yeah, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
It's not coming through the mic, is
I
it?
think
You just click it.
Oh, hello?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you everyone for being here. I guess I want to take seriously Maya's call to action and think about it in conversation with something that Dylan Rodriguez said about our sort of ethical imperative as people within the academy to counter-occupy it in opposition to the sort of conservative, fascist, capitalist forces that have taken this stolen land and have converted it into a nexus of empire and a laboratory of empire. And that theoretical sort of framing for me was useful in thinking structurally about what we can do here at Rutgers because of Maya's call to action. And I asked this question because I'm a grad worker, right? And when I got involved during the strike last year, I did my research, and one of the things that I learned, right, is that if you take all of the part-time lecturers and the grad students, we teach over 50% of the undergraduate classes at Rutgers, right? And that's instructive because what that means is that this transient, vulnerable workforce of people who don't last at a university like this for more than 5 to 6 years. For grad students, I mean, part-time lecturers aren't even as lucky. Most of them don't make it 2 to 3 years. We are teaching the majority of the undergraduate students, and that means we're generating a vast majority of its wealth, at least as it's coming in from undergrads' income. And we're also fulfilling the majority of the mission of what this public university is supposed to do. And I take that very seriously because I believe on some level in developing the discipline of criticism and of doing my research. And I think that organizing on the ground requires that, right? But if we know that the university is not going to build these channels for us of interdisciplinary, across job category, across campus organizing, we have to do that, right? And so I guess I just have a question for y'all of like, if we want to actually take Maya's call seriously and we want to believe that we live in a present where we can also occupy a building, right? That's a possibility for us. We can do that. We have to organize to do that. But the occupation against South African apartheid got the university to divest from South Africa. We can do that here with our relationship to Tel Aviv University, which has Nora's cousin in some icebox somewhere, right? And I guess to me there's an urgency that gets co-opted as crisis and we're supposed to lose our minds every time it happens, but what does being for Palestine mean look like long term? If we want to sit in the now, right, we can talk about South African apartheid, but with what's happening in Gaza, right, like, what are we willing to do? How are we going to set up those structures, right? Because for me, supporting Nora and supporting Sylvia and supporting Maya also means being called in, being in the room, right? And I just want to say structurally for a lot of grads in the university, we aren't invited to faculty meetings. Part-time lecturers are not mentored in the same way as tenure-track faculty. And I'm not saying that as a judgment, but just as a structural reality of how are you going to call those people in if they teach the majority of undergraduate classes? How are you going to occupy those buildings? How are you going to build those relationships with undergrads? Like, who is going to create those networks of communication? It's going to take all of us, and I just wonder what that looks like for us day to day, because y'all don't get paid to do that work. But it's necessary if we want to counter-occupy the university, right? And I say that because I'm grateful for this conversation, but I know for so many of us who are only at Rutgers for 5 to 6 years, what kind of critical skill set can we get from our departments, from our tenured faculty, to take with us to build these infrastructures wherever we go, both at the university and outside of it, right? Because so much of what is happening for people in vulnerable positions is that time is against us, right? But we're also here to do the work, right? When I looked at people on the ground during the strike, so many of the people who were holding down the picket lines were grads and part-time lecturers, were janitors, were undergrad students, right? But how do we keep them in the room with us when structurally they're not meant to stay here, right? So I really feel for this dwindling tenure track stuff, but also what does it mean that, like, for example, in the wins from the third world university strikes, like a decade later, there were basically ethnic studies departments were being put in positions where they were essentially being asked to defund the educational opportunity programs, right, in the favor of developing graduate programs, in the favor of developing tenure track lines. This happened at San Francisco State University immediately after, right? And so we are being pitted against each other as well. And I think I know I've not framed this as a question. I apologize. I hate it when people do that at talks, but I just want to know from the beautiful folks in this room, like, how do we do that work? How do we stand up for Gaza right now? Because as a grad, I'm willing to do that. I will sign every statement. I will show up to every rally. I have organized safety marshals who had organized during strike to come and to physically put our bodies between the counter-protesters, the Zionists, and my Palestinian students and comrades, right? But what does that look like in 1 year from now? 5 years from now?
I want to say one thing. Mish, I know Mish. Mish is my student. I'm very proud of Mish. I love Mish. Mish, you're doing a lot. Okay, I just want to say that because I hear that. I know this about you. I know this about a lot of you in this room, the students. I know you feel like you need to do more. You need to do more. Like you want to put your body there. You want to be in there. You're doing a lot, and we are doing a lot, and you are doing a lot. And what needs to be built, and what I hope, I pray, inshallah, this conversation does, is it creates this connection between you and you and you and you and me and you and you. And like Maurice said, we take that with us. So I just wanted to say that because you are doing a lot, and I know you feel that deeply, that you need to do more, but you are doing a lot. Okay, just know that.
Something very basic, by the way. I don't know how many people know, like, the resolution that passed in Congress yesterday, right?
We talked,
That basically, like, criminalizes pro-Palestinian activism on campus, including things like ceasefire now. Okay, that is something so easy that we can all say, who's the congressman in New Jersey who fucking signed this? Who turns our students into targets when they're asking to be for their own, the lives of their families and their peoples and their communities, and something so stupid, ceasefire. That's something that, that's like a concrete thing that I would ask everyone in this university, stand up for them, refuse this American government is a very strange thing, but like this, I don't even know what a resolution is, like if it has it, but it just should not pass. It should not pass that our students yesterday, we were on the phone with them till midnight because they're like, what is gonna happen to us? And I won't stop. So what's gonna happen? So we need to be on that.
I think I want to say briefly, thank you, Mish, for that. Nothing you said was wrong at all. Everything you said was right. It sort of, your question reminded me of Sylvia's question, what do we need? And I think it's important that we understand that the answer to those questions is not addressed to the administration somewhere who can't even or won't even hear us. But it's a question that we're asking one another, like in this space. What do you need from me? You articulated that. What I need from you, I articulated that. And so I think the questions we should understand as, and we should resist the idea that any one of us has the answer, right? But that this forum is part of the development of a consensus around an answer, a consensus answer, a decision, a commitment, a resolution of our own, right? And I think my opinion is that whatever we do must disrupt business as usual, because business as usual is deadly. And you're pointing out the transience of students. The transience of students, the university depends on that.
Yes.
It can endlessly table any urgent matter because it knows in 4 or 5 or 6 years, there's going to be another whole group of students who asks the same thing, and they'll repeat the cycle, and who knows, but and that it's a strategy for faculty as well. You know, maybe we haven't fallen behind, maybe we've been pushed behind on the awareness that some folk aren't going to be willing to tolerate this long enough to stick around to see some advance happen, so they go somewhere else. And obviously somewhere else they're going to have, you know, their own unique battles as well. But I'm talking about Rutgers in particular, right? About the ways in which what feels like falling back is actually the universities pushing us back, because there are some other people who want your job if you don't want it. And that's the strategy of the university. You know, DEI is also the strategy to manage all of this, to manage all of us. So whatever we do, whether it's occupying buildings, let it be in the interest of disrupting the deadly business as usual.
I'm sorry, just really super quickly. The situation in Gaza is incredibly urgent. And at the same time, the strategy for organizing is also that, especially if you expect it to be long-term organizing, is that it has to be a marathon and not a sprint. And part of what happens is, unfortunately, we are always responding to crisis, and then this crisis, and then that crisis, and then intersecting crises. And so we're, okay, now, what do I do now? Let me just sort of turn all of my attention to this and then burn ourselves out, and then we don't have sustainability over the long term. So my general, general recommendation is for thinking about building networks and communities that are designed to run the marathon. We can respond to those urgent situations along the way, including the one that the people in Gaza are facing right now. So just think about it in that respect, right? You know, because otherwise it's maddening, and it's meant to be maddening. And there's a reason why, you know, it's sort of, because you just sort of, okay, I gotta do this, I gotta do that, I gotta do that, and then you do nothing because you can't respond to everything, because this is happening, and, you know, we're still in a pandemic and climate crises and you know, like whatever. So find a place where you can plug yourself into, find a set of people that you can plug yourself into, and start, you know, again, there's the low-hanging fruit, right? You know, Maya mentioned, let's you know, deal with this resolution, for example, right? This is something that you can respond to immediately. And at the same time, we are building networks that we can actually sustain over the long term, because this shit ain't going away no time soon.
Right.
Yeah, I just part of what we're hoping this sort of seminar series is doing is building that network.
It is.
And so this is just the first of many events that we're going to be doing. So hopefully that network will also be a part. I mean, our story, Melon, whatever it is a political project, right? So that's what we're doing. But I just wanted to read this. I was just looking at this, and these are notes from, I think, our last BIPOC faculty caucus notes. And I think it's a good one. How do we create systemic change at Rutgers when the existing statements and lack of communication seems to suggest the opposite? The administration seems focused on initiatives that reflect more of a sleek, corporate, public-facing image rather than the substantial measures and shifts in climate necessary for true change. Shiny, in quotes, initiatives are usually designed from the top with little consultation or consideration of the institutional knowledge of the very groups that are the most affected by the current institutional arrangements. And that was from 2 years ago, and so I think that tells us what we need to do.
All right, one last, yes, an undergrad, we need the undergrad
It's not a
question.
question, it's more of like a remark.
Mhm.
Like, so, like, I'm like, yeah, I'm an undergrad, and I'm like majoring in information technology and informatics, and minoring in women and gender studies. And like, what I've noticed is that like none of the STEM professors like are doing anything about what's happening in Gaza, or like even like speaking, even like saying we're Palestine, like you guys were saying earlier. But then like my women and gender studies professors are like talking about it and stuff. And I know like one of you guys was saying that like we need like a major disruption to actually do something. And I feel like a large part of it would be getting like the STEM professors to actually care. Because I feel like none of them care.
There is they are planning a teaching at the med school about the medical situation, if that's STEM, right?
Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
So they are doing, and you know, I think the strongest thing is like everybody picks what they're strong at, and that's what they do. Everybody has, that's what, you know, everybody has a strength, that's what we do. I think STEM, you know, I can hook you up with the medical student who said that they were doing that, they were planning that just about the hospitals, what's happening in hospitals in Gaza and in Palestine. I also want to mention, because I forgot to mention, our former, current, and hopefully future colleague, Jaspir Poir, who was also part of this. And her presence is missed right now as we organize. But yes.
All right, everyone, thank you so much for this tremendous day in the shadow of the moment we are in. I just want to quickly, before we wrap, and we are having another event December 7th with Noura Erekat and Mark Lamont Hill. We planned it before this, race and the question of Palestine and the question of race. And then we will have another Sawyer seminar on anti-racism and liberation in contemporary activism, with the entire panel reflecting on the strike. And I'm sure we are going to put it in all of the context, and that will be in February. So please look out for that. Please be well. Oh, and April 25th we'll have about at the Zimmerling Museum racism, anti-racism and liberation in the arts. So please look out for those. Thank you so much. Cease fire now, and yeah, be well. Take care of yourself.